Greetings everyone and welcome to Wiki Talks. Today we are going to discuss the implications of the NATO summit that has been going on in Vilnius for some time, the addition of Sweden as NATO's partner, as well as the threat analysis that they have constructed concerning Russia, and some few pointers were put in the overall summary of the NATO summit, in which the role of PRC in using coercive techniques in order to disengage NATO allies and create differences between each other. That was the primary focus as well. The CNN article that we are going to discuss could slightly mention the issue concerning that the NATO summit was indirectly more of a PR stunt for Russia actually, and it's quite interesting to note that, especially because things were heating up during the summit, especially because Ukraine wanted to get the NATO membership and application of Article 10, Article 6 be applied to Ukraine and its sovereignty as well, since Russian soldiers are already on ground. While the option concerning the Lend-Lease from the United States and its allies is ongoing inside Ukraine, but things are looking quite bleak. Today we have with us Brigadier Retired Wakar. He's a renowned defense analyst. We're going to ask some peculiar questions concerning the summit. Welcome to the show, sir. So, interestingly, we have seen this summit being arranged almost every year. They come up with different security plans and dynamics, especially when it comes to Western alliances. But today, primarily the focus was on the Ukrainian conflict. But things didn't turn out quite well when Zelensky went in, and there are actually pictures in which the social media was all hellblaze concerning Zelensky being isolated during the summit. How do you foresee Ukraine's future, even if it does become a NATO member?
I think before that, we can just walk through the Western media, especially as a follow-up of NATO's meet, and then even Nordic states meeting at Helsinki and hosting Biden. If you look at how Guardian and CNN, and even I think mainstream media in France, France 24 and DW, have taken it, I think there was an element of gloom, and like CNN pointing out that the summit almost came off the rails, and it was saved by maybe some last-minute effort. You are right when you say that Zelensky appeared to be isolated. Naturally, the amount of demands that were put by the NATO, and as we discussed in the previous discourse, that he was forced to actually outsource the command of the war. So mainly now it's physically and I would say technically and operationally strategically controlled by NATO. So it's kind of a proxy war now. So Ukraine has to become a proxy of the NATO and then achieve their objectives. There was also discussion of induction of Sweden into NATO, and then I'm sure Finland, of course, is the first time formally it is hosting that. So if you look at the response from the Russians, especially I think Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister, it was very, very mild. And if you look at, I think TASS agencies, mainly Lavrov said that Russia knows what measures to take as NATO expands to Finland and Sweden, and he basically talks of their prime national interests of the Russia will be guarded. It looks like, if you include Finland into the extended NATO, it looks like probably they have stretched the Russians for another maybe 2,000 kilometers or more than that. But Finland is not populated beyond certain lines. If you look at the Lapland, is almost it's like Antarctic. So they have very less population. But definitely, apparently looks they have stretched. Then of course is the inclusion of Sweden, which starts affecting the Baltic Sea and Gulf of basically Norway, and that area, of course, they can start choking the supplies for the Russians. So in that sense, I think maybe it's an element of satisfaction that they've included two more, just to make them self-assured that together we can do that. But I think in case they are going to push, let's say the Baltic states, for instance, this was held in Lithuania, so very, very significant. And the Nordic state meet with Biden was held in Helsinki. So these are, two capitals which are very closer to Russian borders. So it's kind of, communicating a message to Putin of their forward policy, something like that. So I think it's a mixed bag, and we have to see how the result comes out. Main thing is strategically they have failed to isolate President Putin and Russia economically or diplomatically, because look at the response coming from the African countries, Middle East, even I think the oil sheikdoms like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and UAE, they are having parallel relations with Russia. So they are not being able to. Even India, Pakistan, we had 2 tankers coming from Russia providing oil paid in Chinese yuan. So these are some of the things that they have to see, that can West now push the entire world for their own war.
Another important aspect that comes in mind is the ongoing Lend-Lease program. Western powers are arming Ukraine on repeated basis. It's been happening since, I think, 2014 actually. And now there are Leopard 2 tanks, the induction of HIMARS and M4 carbine mortars, you name it, almost just about anything, even mine-clearing operations. Now West has completely engulfed in the Russo-Ukrainian war. But the main question that comes in mind is that how do they see the NATO strategy being adopted inside Ukraine as a feasible approach in order to gain some negotiation time with President Putin? Because it seems as if the entire idea of the Zaporozhye counteroffensive was to pressurize the Russians in order to accept some form of ceasefire or come back to terms to the Minsk agreement. There were options being thrown out for reclaiming Crimea within a month, and interestingly there was a lot of talk that this 6 months trained, fully trained, NATO trained mechanized brigades the Ukrainians have actually indoctrinated would be capable in defeating the Russian forces all across the Zaporozhye front till they reached Mariupol or somewhere soon, within like months and stuff. But it seems like the operation has gone downhill for them. So I don't get it. When it comes to the great scheme of affairs, what was the goal when you know that they don't have air superiority, you do know that they don't have artillery superiority, manpower is low, they don't have trained officials in order to even drive a Leopard 2 tank. How did they come up with this conclusion that somehow this would work?
I think there are 2 parts of any military operation. One is, of course, the physical operation itself, how it is conceived, including the strategic preparation and then launching, and of course the objective and the end state that you desire. The other is the strategic communication part, which is generally called information operation. I think more effort was on the information operation, and so that's why they were trying to magnify any successes. It was very interesting when the Russians, if you look at the Russians, the way they have basically got hold of these 3 or 4 states or districts of regions of Ukraine, starting from
almost 4 provinces.
It's just like a wall, and they have created definitely a main line of defense, and then there is a kind of security zone or no man lands, which is maybe at places it is 5 kilometers, at places it could be 15 kilometers, and that's very normal. Even in India-Pakistan context, you don't sit right on the border. And the Ukrainian so-called counteroffensive basically has been able to just affect this security zone at certain places. It was natural that if you put certain tanks, they would come. But it was also a killing zone. So look at the casualties suffered and the armament destroyed by the Russians. And I think Russians are very happy. So first thing is that how do you conceive an operational plan? You have already outsourced the war. So most probably it was the NATO geniuses, sitting in Brussels or maybe Lviv, where they have their forward headquarters, and then pushing. Now there is also issue of training. You cannot train, a Ukrainian soldier who is operated on T-72 or maybe T-80 UD on a Leopard 2 or an M1A1 Abrams or Challenger in 6 months, because you're shifting from 3-man to 4-man tank crew, and they are definitely more sophisticated. A master gunner would require, I'm sure, more than 5 years to train. So if you're just putting people and they can random guys who can go, and then this is the second line as far as Ukrainians are concerned. The first line, first cadre, the one which fought actually for last more than 1 year now, they have been lost. Either they are injured, killed, or they are shifted to another sector. So basically, these are second line, or maybe some conscripts which are trained for 6 or 7 months. So there were a lot of propaganda that they are being trained in North America or Europe and all that. So that has been, I think, the missing link. You talked of the air superiority. You can't launch armor operation without air cover. At least air parity you don't have. In terms of firepower, look at the Russian systems. I think this enormous firepower. And then is of course domination. Then Russian military operates as a monolith. They don't have advisors, sitting and then guiding you to do, in terms of operation. So there's a unity of command right from President Putin to the Ministry of Defense, and then it goes down to the regular soldier. And we've seen that they have outsmarted. So I think these are some of the factors. And now probably the last trump card, maybe they have certain other cards. But as far as this season was concerned, because this is the campaigning season, because before the snow starts falling in October, November, they have to close the operation. So it was going to be June, July, or maybe end May, June, July. And I think the time has also been lost. And there's a lot of, and there's a factor of morale also. The Ukrainian forces are so much, even, if you look at Zelensky's fate regarding whether he's alive or not, the chief of the defense staff, it's not very clear. And he was out of operations for, I think, a couple of months. So there's a lot of demoralization also of the Ukrainian soldier. So all told, I think maybe some political efforts are made and diplomatically Russia is engaged to bring him onto negotiating table, but they are definitely on a weaker wicket.
So coming back to the summit, and point 23 of the summary they've discussed, an interesting point, I'm going to just read this out concerning the People's Republic of China. NATO members comprehensively state that the People's Republic of China's stated ambitions and coercive policies challenge our interests, security and values. The PRC employs a broad range of political, economic and military tools to increase its global footprint and project power, while remaining opaque about its strategy, intentions and military buildup. The PRC's militias, hybrid in cyber operations and its confrontational rhetoric and disinformation target allies and harms alliance security. The PRC seeks to control key technological and industrial sectors, critical infrastructure and strategic materials and supply chains. It uses its economic leverage to create strategic dependencies and enhance its influence. It strives to subvert the rules-based international order, including in the space, cyber and maritime domains. The first thing that came into my head is as if Uncle Sam is talking to himself.
Yeah, I think that's, if you look at, we'll put, I think, this article by Global Times on 7th July. And it was very interesting. They have a cartoon with, Uncle Sam on a NATO tank and mainly sitting in Lithuania, talking of top threat. So NATO's agenda against China exposed and advanced by Lithuania. What happened was that, I think, before 7th July, there was an article published in a Lithuanian newspaper, 16-page strategy paper. And they actually threatened, People's Republic of China that your policy in, Taiwan state cannot be
Interestingly,
supported.
there is no mention of Taiwan in the summit.
Yeah. So maybe it's an indirect mention. And China then, very, I would say, in a funny manner, they basically ridicule Lithuania, for God's sake, have a heart. And how could you have a, South China Sea policy? And because probably Lithuania has established, diplomatic relations with Taiwan, it's kind of signaling, despite whatever. I will not say that we should undermine, but definitely. So maybe it was again, information operation just before that. And now if you look at the statement on PR, look at NATO's area of operation. Is it South China Sea? I don't think so.
Yeah.
They didn't have any business in Libya. They didn't have any business in Afghanistan. Basically, it's a North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Mainly it was Europe-centric, or maybe in the Atlantic Ocean.
Yeah.
And the alliance on both sides of the Atlantic. So now imagine, them poking China from Vilnius. So it's quite absurd. And the response, I think, has been that China-Russia alliance has actually grown in terms of economic trade, financial, and maybe military. Definitely they have assurances. If you look at their maritime exercises, even in the Indian Ocean or in the Indo-Pacific, around even Sea of Japan, they've been doing some exercises. So it will strengthen, and ultimately it's the Eurasian Brotherhood. If you look at rest of Eurasia, which includes SCO, and even the African countries are now coming up. Middle East is joining. So I think Eurasian Brotherhood will get strengthened because geographically Eurasia is connected. You don't have to cross Pacific or Atlantic, to go, and you can drive from Islamabad to Kabul in Central Asia, and maybe you can drive up to Moscow, and you can drive from Beijing to Moscow and Europe, and you can there is, I think, a tourism pact being initiated between Iran and Egypt. And if you look at the geography, I think even we can drive from here to Egypt. So Eurasia is quite geographically connected. The only thing is it was playing in the hands of Western powers, and there was infighting, and we could not progress. But there's tremendous, I think, potential. So I think this is all part of the information operations. Mentioning China in a NATO summit is, I think,
pretty obvious.
I won't comment.
Coming back to Ukraine, interestingly, we have seen Zelensky as a lost puppy. Unfortunately, that's exactly how the picture was painted during the summit. And when it comes to his political future, right now what we are witnessing is different fronts inside Ukraine. There are videos coming up of different veteran soldiers from United States, from UK, from France, actually, leading their own columns and their own brigades in certain areas. It's more like the Foreign Legion is practically directly being involved in this. Before it was in Bakhmut, now it's in here as well. Now, interestingly, they have said to Zelensky that these are the cards you want to play with. You have a set of cards, but it keeps interchanging throughout and taken. Previously, we all know exactly how the Western media portrayed the heroics inside Bakhmut, but once it was taken, they said that it was just a heap of garbage and it was nothing of strategic importance. But somehow it became a PR stunt for the Ukrainians that we have to hold that, and in the meantime, they lost a lot of troops in that. Now this silent offensive, this PR stunt or whatever you name it, isn't Zelensky technically falling in NATO's trap that if the Minsk agreement cannot be reached, if Mr. Putin cannot come to the negotiating table, and if Ukraine doesn't have enough cards to put in on that same table, we're going to pull off the switch? We have foreign volunteers there. We have Ukraine on the hop because it depends so much on Western weapons that we can actually, maybe think of that, Putin, you can have things at the eastern Danube River side, but let us do whatever we want to do with the western part.
Yeah, I think you are right. And it's not for the first time the proxies are, having this dilemma. You look at Vietnam War, the fall of Saigon. And we did a paper on that, and I think we'll show it in this blog and the discourse, that the president of South Vietnam till last week was assured that everything is going to be all right, and he was assured by the Americans, and the American ambassador had to leave from the presidential or the governor house on a helicopter, on a UH-1H. And same happened with Ashraf Ghani. You remember how he left, with bags full of dollars? Now, our memory is very, very short. It was just before the Americans, I think.
But that's what the Americans claim. I don't think so. He actually did that.
No, but the thing is how he was assured that NATO is going to guard and this regime and all that. But it fell, So I think Zelensky, I don't know when it happens, but this is the kind of assurance or the pep talk given to him, because they would like to extract maximum out of it. We have already, I think, discussed the Lend-Lease Act. It is very similar to Lend-Lease Act of World War II, in which I don't know what kind of assurances have been given by Ukraine, But I know certain European countries were paying, this cost of Lend-Lease Act till late 70s. So how much Ukraine has to return? Because nothing is free. The Americans are giving it. Despite that they are claiming that it's for our defense, and all that. In 2022 they came up with this Ukrainian Democracy Defense Lend-Lease Act, and Zelensky is definitely the linchpin within that. But when they see that, and there is also internal tussle taking place, because this, I think, going to be Ukrainian election. I don't know whether they declare martial law and they keep on going with Zelensky. But the ex-mayor of Kyiv, the boxer, Vitaly, I think he did announce that probably he's going to stand. And even I think Prigozhin also announced that he is going to stand, because there's a lot of area. Despite that, I don't know what is happening to him, and we'll discuss it in a separate discourse. So maybe this is the last year for Zelensky, and he has been told to deliver. And in case he doesn't, they will simply abandon him and bring somebody else. And you are right, maybe the area up to the Dnieper River is lost, and then they go and sit on the negotiating table.
Yeah, exactly. We're going to discuss that further, specifically when it comes to the Lviv formula and the Carpathian solution. There are videos coming up concerning that this thing might be on board, because apparently there is reports of mass mobilization, forced conscription, and such videos do come up from certain regions where such ethnicities technically do not support the Ukrainian war that is ongoing these days. So that's one of the history lessons, specifically when it comes to US dealing its foreign policy when it wants to exit from a certain area. We have seen that happening beforehand as well. And this place itself has a history, because previously when it came to the division of Poland between the USSR and Germany, we have seen that. Even beforehand that, what happened, the Russian Empire and Prussians engulfed Poland and partitioned them equally between each other. So this has been happening in Europe-centric politics as well. Nothing is set in stone, and countries do come and go during this history. We have seen that happening in Kosovo, between Serbia as well. It can happen in Ukraine. Let's see how things fold up. But for now, the updates were concerning the NATO summit, as well as somehow NATO interconnecting things that are ongoing between Russia and Ukraine with China, as well as the addition of Sweden and probably Ukraine if it does well in the conflict. Thank you so much for joining us. We will be doing another discussion concerning Pakistan, Iran, and Saudi Arabia nexus, the new upcoming power in the Eurasian sphere. For now, thank you very much. We will see you in the next video. Please do leave a like and subscribe. Thank you very much.